Sit him there. I am Orhan Ebiri. I represent the glory of the Ottoman Empire. The empire keeps detailed records of all uprising in the vicinity of its lands, and so I have been commissioned to write the final record of the history of the uprising of the rebels in Mageyndren between...
Not rebels.
What was that?
We were not rebels.
Guard, I need some privacy.
Sir, I am not permitted to leave the prisoner.
Young man, I am here on the authority of Abdul Majid I, the 31st Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. I am the guest of the Shah himself. The prisoner is bound hand and foot. From the looks of him, he has not eaten for weeks. My safety is secure and this conversation is not meant for you. Now get out.
But you are wrong, my friend. This conversation is for him, and for the rest of the world.
Muhammad Dastgir Assadullah. Dastgir. You have been in this prison for more than a year. Your so-called prophet is dead. The only reason you are still alive is to speak to me. By now you should know that you will die here. Much has happened with this uprising around the country, and we only ask that you give us a record of the truth that occurred in that fort.
The truth? Hasn't the prince and the rest given you their account? The Shah, maybe?
Yes. We received all that, but we are concerned it may not be accurate, considering the circumstances.
What do you want to know?
Your leaders, who were they? What was their motivation? How did you choose your leadership?
You want to know facts, dates, times, names. I will not tarnish the memory of my brothers with such a depiction. I will tell you, but not how you want it told. To understand what happened in Mageyndren, you must understand the persons they were, why we followed them.
Them?
Yes, them. Our masters, the warrior and the hidden treasure. Shall we begin? The early years of Mulla Husayn in Quddus could not have been more different. Mulla Husayn was born in Bushire. His family was quite wealthy, one of the wealthiest in the region, I think, thanks to his father's business as a cloth dyer. I would think he had quite a comfortable life, but that inquisitive streak, that questioning mind, I tend to believe he took that from his mother. She was a poet, quite well known, I am told. She was always challenging the concepts of her limitations in the community. Husayn would have taken many lessons from her, and definitely the flair for poetry. Mulla Husayn somehow always knew that he was destined to live a life beyond his hometown. There was an inscription on the wall of his house that he made as a young boy.
Your thoughts will take you out of this house and will lead you to the abode of mystery.
Husayn had 4 siblings, 3 of whom have since his time become dedicated Bab'is.
And this is what you call yourselves, Bab'is.
Yes, followers of His Holiness, the Bab. I'm sure, you being an eminent researcher, you must have heard that Mullah Husayn was trained in horse riding and swordsmanship. It is easy to believe this from the many accounts of his heroism at the fort, but I personally think it is impossible. I have spoken to a number of his childhood companions, and they all tell me that our dear Husayn was a rather weak child, and even as a youth. Can you believe he would at times tire out from writing excessively when carrying out his Quranic studies? Writing! Can you believe? The miracles of the one true God. Now in contrast, Quddus was born on the outskirts of Barfush, and he was the son of humble rice cultivators. Unlike Mullah Husayn, Quddus' mother and father passed away when he was very young. It was his stepmother, I believe, who raised him. She was particularly dedicated to and fond of him, which is why I can assume she would have looked to develop that inquisitive mind which his teachers identified to be considered unique.
They seem to have grown up a considerable distance away. Barfurush and Bushriye are at least 15 farsangs apart. How did they meet?
Their desire to know more. In honesty, I know more of Mullah Husayn's story at this part of their lives. By the age of 21, Mullah Husayn was a licensed Usuli Mujtahid, but he must have come across something during his time in Mashhad which led him to investigate the Shaikhi movement. He declined a cleric position in Bushriye, and instead he travelled to Karbala in your empire to meet with Sayyid Kazim Rashdi, the successor to Sheikh Ahmad.
And where was Quddus during all of this?
Quddus studied in a madrasa in Sari by the coast in his early years. I believe he would have met Mullah Husayn in Mashhad during their studies, but I can't be certain. I do know though that they were in Karbala together. Yes, they were both unique students of Sayyid Kazim. By the time Quddus arrived in Karbala, Mullah Husayn had been a student of Sayyid Kazim for about 4 years. By this time, Mullah Husayn had gained the trust of his teacher and was even answering questions on his behalf. I have heard, however, that Quddus too was a favoured student of Sayyid Kazim. Some even say his favourite. Well, that doesn't really matter, does it? Both of them were truly well versed in the holy text, but personally, I might have thought they had different personalities. I find it astounding to know that he was in our midst the whole time.
You mean this Bab?
Yes. You see, I too was among Sayyid Kazim's followers at the time. Briefly. But even during my time there, I had heard stories about Sayyid Kazim and a youth, one whom no one really knew at the time. Sheikh Hassan once told me of a time when he met with a youth when he was accompanying Sayyid Kazim in Karbala. Apparently, Sayyid Kazim had been offered a drink from a silver cup and had graciously accepted. You understand, of course, this was against the custom of Islam, to drink from a silver cup. Later on, during a sermon at the madrasa, Sayyid Kazim had stopped midway, refusing to go on when this same youth entered the room. No one at all knew his station. Sayyid Kazim Sayyid Kazim passed away in 1843. And this was the true beginning. You see, Sayyid Kazim left no successor. Instead, he instructed us all to go out in search of the promised one. But the question was, where to begin? Mullah Husayn was heartbroken. He was heartbroken at the loss of Sayyid Kazim, but he was faithful to that final instruction. He attempted to guide some of those in Karbala to take up the cause and spread out. Most were too fearful, afraid of change. They tried the easy way out by suggesting that Mullah Husayn was the long-awaited Qayyim. If you could have seen his anger. I think this made him give up hope on those so-called followers. He decided to remove himself from everyone and entered a 40-day fast. There was nothing in particular in Najaf, which is why he quickly left to Bushehr and finally to Shiraz. It was divine guidance.
And in Shiraz is where he encountered the Bab, did he not?
Yes. He was greeted at the gates of the city, in fact almost as if he was expected. It is hard to adequately describe the first moments between Mullah Husayn and the Bab. Many times in the fort we heard his story repeated to inspire us, but it would only be perfect from his lips. Mullah Husayn was led by the youth to his home. There was an air of mysticism surrounding the whole affair. A stranger so warm, so kind, that Husayn followed without question or concern. A while later, they were seated in the home of this youth, Husayn being served by the hands of His Holiness himself, not yet knowing the station before him. Then it began, the interview. Whom after Sayyid Kazim do you regard as his successor and your leader? This was the beginning of a historic exchange between the Prophet and his first independent disciple. A moment the Bab foretold would come to be celebrated as one of the most important in mankind's history. Ironically, despite having searched for so long for his beloved, when the Bab revealed himself and his mission, the questioning mind of Mullah Husayn initially attempted to test the veracity of the claims with questions. That was cut short when the authority of the Bab replied, "Had you not been my guest, your position would indeed have been a grievous one. The all-encompassing grace of God has saved you. It is for God to test His servants, and not for His servants to judge Him in accordance with their deficient standards." It was at this very moment that the Bab revealed, unasked, the first chapter of a commentary on the Surah of Joseph, an act foretold by Sayyid Kazim. That act of questioning the Bab, Mullah Husayn would regret for many years. I recall he once later on, while walking with a friend by a religious school, and in his usual manner of poetry, he said,
"Never from this school has come learning. This house of ignorance is fit for burning."
It is quite a harsh statement, unusual, especially from a scholar. But he explained,
"If it wasn't for the so-called knowledge I took from these schools, I would not have argued with my Lord.
From that day of revelation, Mullah Husayn's allegiance was without question. He would live and die for his master.
And what was his master's instructions? To teach, proclaim this new faith far and wide.
If only. That would have been far simpler. Imagine finally having found the one truth, a truth which everyone else is searching for, and then being told he cannot share it.
Cannot share it.
Yes. The Bab instructed that 17 others after Mullah Husayn must recognize the Bab spontaneously and of their own accord. Until then, Mullah Husayn was not allowed to do anything. When the number was complete, the Bab was to choose one of them to accompany him on his pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina.
So what did he do?
Wait, pray, conduct sermons, anything in the hope of allowing the 17 more to find their way. I recall him telling us how during those days he would often be called by the Bab to visit in the night time. He would not sleep even for a moment, instead preferring to sit at the feet of his beloved Bab, oblivious to everything else. He would say,
How rapidly those precious hours flew by. With what feelings of sadness and regret I beheld the dawning of day.
And what of Quddus? When did he accept this faith?
Well, that is not a simple answer. You see, Quddus was the last of the 18 who were meant to find the Bab independently. In contrast to the repeated queries of Mullah Husayn on the night of revelation, Quddus recognized the Bab solely from the way he walked, asking Mullah Husayn, "Why do you try and conceal him?" The Bab then explained that they had been communicating in the world of spirit. So I venture to say that his acceptance of the faith was far before that meeting.
From the way he walked. Anyway, the total numbers were now complete. Didn't the Bab say that he would begin a pilgrimage with Mullah Husayn accompanying him?
Yes, a pilgrimage indeed, but not with Mullah Husayn. The days of our companionship are approaching their end. My covenant with you is now accomplished. Gird up the loins of endeavor and arise to diffuse my cause. In this pilgrimage upon which we are soon to embark, we have chosen Quddus as our companion. We have left you behind to face the onslaught of a fierce and relentless enemy. Rest assured, however, that a bounty unspeakably glorious shall be conferred upon you. Be assured that the high mission for which you have been created will, in its entirety, be accomplished by you. Until you have consummated your work, if all the darts of an unbelieving world be directed against you, they will be powerless to hurt a single hair of your head.
So he chose Quddus over Mullah Husayn.
Yes, it was already destined, each one's roles and paths. But sometimes sensibilities, even destiny, cannot soothe the soul. The time finally came for Mullah Husayn to leave on a journey of his own to spread the new faith. He was to travel to a number of cities and finally to Tehran. The Bab comforted him, but he also told him that in his travels he would come across a mystery, one that is greater than anything to be found along the pilgrimage.
A mystery? This is a person, I assume.
Well, I really don't know. But my heart tells me it will take more than assumptions to unravel this mystery. And now, it is not yet time.
Very well, Dastgir. Anyway, the paths diverge here. How did the two, Quddus and Mullah Husayn, how did they meet again?
The word was beginning to spread, with the 18 letters of the living carrying out the specific task set out by the Bab. And with that recognition came danger. The followers of our new faith were quickly becoming perceived as rebels and troublemakers, particularly to the clergy of each city. The Bab's pilgrimage took 9 months. When they arrived back in Bushehr, Quddus was instructed to leave to Shiraz and teach the masses, which of course he did immediately. Early on during his travels, Quddus came across a man by the name of Mulla Sadiq. He was a respected person in Shiraz, who would often preach from a pulpit to large groups of people. Mulla Sadiq quickly accepted the faith of the Bab, and during a sermon, he closed with the words and injunction of the Bab. This immediately caused a stir in the gathering, which spread through the city. There were cries of blasphemy and heresy. The governor saw it fit to arrest both Mullah Sadiq and Quddus. There was very little inquiry before they proceeded with punishment. Their noses were pierced, a cord attached to the incision, and they were led, like cattle, to the streets of Shiraz, where an angry mob cheered on. The governor then instructed for each of them to receive 1,000 lashes. At the end of it all, their beards were burnt, and they were kicked out of the city. This was the beginning. They were the very first to have been harmed for the faith, Mullah Sadiq and Quddus.
That is unfortunate. But they must have expected these dangers when doing something so drastic. But the humiliation. This governor. He wouldn't have happened to be Husayn Khan? The governor who arrested the Bab himself?
Yes, the very same. That was his immediate action after the expulsion of Mullah Sadiq and Quddus from the city.
And what became of Quddus after Shiraz?
Quddus after Shiraz was completely undaunted. He continued his work by visiting numerous cities, Kirman, Yaz, Tehran, all before finally arriving home in Barfurush. Home. There's always a beauty about home, a familiarity, the smells, the sounds. In Quddus' case, a desperate mother.
Mother? Didn't you say she had passed away early on in life?
Yes, I apologize. Stepmother. But you could not tell the difference. She loved him dearly. She would often remark on her concerns that he wasn't married. I hear this is a common concern of mothers in many places. Quddus would tell her with absolute confidence.
The day of my wedding is not yet come. That day will be unspeakably glorious, not within the confines of this house, but out in the open air, under the vault of heaven, in the midst of the Sabze Maidan. Before the gaze of the multitude, there I shall celebrate my nuptials and witness the consummation of my hopes.
What troubles you, my friend? I see a change in your face.
No, it's nothing. Please continue.
Very well. He stayed 3 years, I believe, in Barfurush. before he was reunited with Mullah Husayn.
I have records here of the Bab's incarceration in the castle of Maku.
Yes, he was moved to Tabriz, then Maku, and then Shirik. Mullah Husayn met with the Bab in Maku. The governor, it seems, had a dream about the arrival of Mullah Husayn and treated him with the same reverence as he would the Prophet Muhammad himself. It was a bittersweet time. Husayn was once again reunited with his beloved, but it was not for long. A stay of 9 days in all. There they spent cherished moments, often looking out across the plains at the Araxes, where Zoroaster walked the shores and revealed his mission. Standing at the edge of the castle, looking out across the landscape, the Bab told Mullah Husayn towards the end of his stay, "You have walked on foot all the way from your native province to this place. On foot you likewise must return until you reach your destination. For your days of horsemanship are yet to come. From Tehran you should proceed to Mageyndren, where God's hidden treasure will be made manifest to you. You will be called upon to perform deeds so great as will dwarf the mightiest achievements of the past. The nature of your task will in that place be revealed to you, and strength and guidance will be bestowed upon you, that you may be fitted to render your service to his cause."
Just a moment. Didn't Mullah Husayn already discover, as you put it, a mystery in Tehran?
Possibly. I do not know for certain, but in Mageyndren, it was a treasure he discovered. Quddus.
Quddus. Quddus was the treasure. How so? They had met before.
Up to this point, the paths of Mullah Husayn and Quddus had crossed, but the interaction was always limited, the focal point always being the Bab himself. Mullah Husayn had not yet discovered whom Quddus was.
Dastgir, I still do not understand. What do you mean by discover?
Look to everything I've told you. Look to the details. Those who discovered the faith often did so by studying the holy text. Both Quddus and Mullah Husayn were themselves scholars. The mission of the Bab was confirmed to Mullah Husayn by a commentary on the Surah of Joseph. Mullah Sadiq began with the Bab's writings. The pearls of wisdom are in the text, my friend. This is where Mullah Husayn discovered his treasure and the station of Quddus. Mullah Husayn arrived in Barfurush after setting out from Maku. He went directly to the home of Quddus. It was a beautiful night. Quddus himself waited upon Mullah Husayn. With his own hands, he removed the dust and washed the blistered skin of his feet. Mullah Husayn was introduced with extreme reverence to each of the believers who gathered to meet him. It was as if Mullah Husayn was the revered guest. How quickly the roles reversed. Quddus inquired whether Mullah Husayn had brought any of the Bab's writings. He had none. Quddus then instead presented Mullah Husayn with the pages of a manuscript which he had in his possession, and requested him to read certain of its passages. As soon as Mullah Husayn had read just one page of that manuscript, he had a complete change in his expression, in his tone, everything. There was sheer admiration and surprise. Laying down the manuscript, he bowed and said,
"The hidden treasure of which the Bab has spoken now lies unveiled before my eyes. Its light has dispelled the gloom of perplexity and doubt. Though my master be now hidden amid the mountain fastnesses of Azerbaijan, the sign of his splendor and the revelation of his might stand manifest before me. I have found in Mageyndren the reflection of his glory.
A reflection of the Bab. That is a considerable praise to give if you are a believer in the faith.
It was not praise, Orhan. It was the truth. From that moment on, Quddus' instructions to Mullah Husayn was second only to the Bab himself. The seat of honor was no longer occupied by Mullah Husayn, and even his demeanor was of utmost humility whenever he was in the presence of Quddus. That night, Quddus instructed Mullah Husayn to proceed to Mashhad and to erect a house to receive guests, which he did immediately without hesitation. Soon after, both Quddus and Mullah Husayn were receiving numerous guests inquiring about the new faith.
They had a house, an audience, all of it. How did all of you end up in the fort?
Not long after, there was an incident in Mashhad. Mullah Husayn's special helper was arrested and subjected to shameful torture, similar to what befell Quddus in Shiraz. Mullah Husayn and Quddus were clear that retaliation was not the right thing. It was not the right action at that point of time, but some individuals, they took things into their own hands. They staged protests in the streets. They even killed some men. It was not the right time. The prince, Hamza Mirza, he was stationed nearby and he wanted to deal with the matter before it got out of hand. Mullah Husayn was known and respected, so an invitation was sent for him for a discussion. This is why Mullah Husayn and Quddus parted ways. While Mullah Husayn met with the prince, Quddus left to attend a conference in Badasht.
Ah, yes, the conference. I recall reading the records of this. Tell me, was it true that the leadership of the faith was split into two camps there? My records show that there was a dispute between Quddus and a lady from Qazvin.
There were misunderstandings, heated arguments, even questions of loyalty. How else can change come if not with the shaking up of the old ways? Any differences that may have existed were put aside by the end of the conference, and there was only one clear path. Immediately after the conference, Quddus was arrested and taken to Sari.
And Mullah Husayn was with the prince during all of this.
Yes, the negotiations with the prince took some time, but ended in perfect happiness for both parties. The prince even gifted Mullah Husayn a horse and a sword. This was the time when Mullah Husayn received that fateful message from the Bab. I still recall the messenger arriving, bearing the note and the gift. It was the Bab's green turban. With my green turban, the emblem of my lineage, and with the black standard unfurled before you, hasten to the verdant isle and lend your assistance to my beloved Quddus. In the note, the Bab also bestowed the name Sayyid Ali upon Mullah Husayn, enabling him to don the unmistakable green turban of the Bab. 223 of us, including Husayn, immediately answered the call of the Bab. Hoisting the black standard, we rode from town to town, proclaiming openly the message of the Bab. More men joined our troop of their own free will, but not all were to stay. At every juncture, Mullah Husayn would warn the men of the danger and trials that awaited us. At first, most were unshaken, but as time went by, the reality of where we were heading became clear. Fear crept in. 20 men left our company near Savatko.
There were more than 200 of you together on horseback. This must have been intimidating to many.
Maybe initially, but all who spoke to us knew our intention. We proclaimed the new faith, but on none did we force our belief. We only ever wanted the freedom to deliver the message. Those who refused the message, did we still treat as brother and friend? But there were always those whom through evil motives incited fear and anger in the hearts of weaker men. In Barfurush was our first such encounter. The mujtahid of that town incited many of its townsfolk with lies. We were stopped some way away from the town by a multitude of angry people equipped with ammunitions and firearms. Stopping our march a distance from them, we prepared to draw our swords, but we were stopped by our commander. He insisted we were not to unsheath our swords unless forced to defend ourselves. At that very moment, shots were fired in our direction and 6 of our brothers fell to the ground. We were stunned, angered even, and so we pleaded with Husayn to let us draw our swords, let us defend ourselves.
The time is not yet come. The number is as yet incomplete.
At that very moment, a bullet pierced the chest of the innocent and simple Sayyid Rida. Husayn could take no more. He may have been angered, but even then, he turned to the heavens asking for permission.
Behold, O God, my God, the plight of thy chosen companions, and witness the welcome which these people have accorded thy loved ones. Thou knowest that we cherish no other desire than to guide them to the way of truth, and to confer upon them the knowledge of thy revelation. Thou hast thyself commanded us to defend our lives against the assaults of the enemy. Faithful to thy command, I now arise with my companions to resist the attack which they have launched against us.
I saw Husayn dismount and launch himself after the assailant of Sayyid Rida. Nothing could stand in his way. The man must have seen the fire in the eyes of Mullah Husayn and the undaunted charge. He tried to hide himself behind a tree. Mullah Husayn then, in a single swipe, he cleaved the man, the tree and the musket in two. Seeing this, the enemy, they fell into fear and confusion. They disbanded and they raced back to the town. Yes, it is true. And there are countless more tales of impossible bravery. Someday these will be known, but we have not the time, my friend.
How is this possible? A scholar, a physically weak man.
So it was not ye who slew them, but God who slew them. And those shafts were God's, not thine. He would make trial of the faithful by a gracious trial from himself. Verily God heareth, knoweth.
That is from the Quran.
Indeed. Those were the words spoken by the Bab when he heard of the incident. You must remember this, my friend. The spirit that flowed through them both, Husayn and Quddus, it was not of this world. They could not have accomplished so much as mere men. Ultimately, Mullah Husayn led us to the fort. It was not a fort to begin with, but under his guidance, we constructed defensive walls and a moat. Always remember, Orhan, the only reason we resided in the fort was for refuge. Refuge from the onslaught of the Shah's men who sought to rid this world of the Bab'is. Every strike was to preserve our lives, and never once did we act in aggression to an innocent.
At this time, Quddus was still in Sari, a prisoner.
Yes. Not long into us seeking refuge in the fort, we were visited by Mirza Hussain Ali.
I have heard of this name. Who is this man?
He is a prominent follower of our faith. I myself have had little interaction with him, but there was always a special reverence paid to him by Mullah Husayn. I heard he was central to the events of the Conference of Badash as well. It was he that instructed a small party to demand the freedom of Quddus from Sari, which he did immediately. Before the arrival of Quddus, Mullah Husayn instructed us to observe towards Quddus a reverence such as we would feel prompted to show the Bab himself. Mullah Husayn told us clearly,
As to myself, you must consider me as his lowly servant. You should bear him such loyalty that if he were to command you to take my life, you would unhesitatingly obey. If you waver or hesitate, you will have shown your disloyalty to your faith. Not until he summons you to his presence must you in any wise venture to intrude upon him. You should forsake your desires and cling to his will and pleasure. You should refrain from kissing either his hands or his feet, for his blessed heart dislikes such evidences of reverent affection. Such should be your behavior, that I may feel proud of you before him. The glory and authority with which he has been invested must needs be duly recognized by even the most insignificant of his companions. Whoso departs from the spirit and the latter of my admonitions, a grievous chastisement will surely overtake him.
I still recall the night of the arrival of Quddus from Sari. The night the forests of Mageyndren sang. He had sent a messenger ahead to announce his arrival. Upon hearing that Quddus was arriving, Mullah Husayn leapt to his feet in excitement, and he gathered 100 of us. He gave us 2 candles each, and with his own hand he lit them. He urged us, Go and receive our master. The darkness of the night was removed by the radiance of our joyous hearts. In the midst of the forest of Mageyndren, our eyes instantly recognized the face of the beloved Quddus. We pressed eagerly around his steed, and with every mark of devotion sang our tribute of love and undying allegiance. Still holding the lighted candles in our hands, we followed him on foot towards the fort. Quddus, as he rode alongside us, he appeared as a day star that shines amidst its satellites. As we approached the fort, we broke forth into the hymn of glorification and praise. Holy, holy, the Lord our God, the Lord of the angels and the Spirit.
Holy, holy the Lord our God, the Lord of the angels and the Spirit.
Mullah Husayn raised the refrain, and we responded. The forest of Mageyndren and all its inhabitants rejoiced that night with the arrival of our beloved. We were 313 in number at the time of the arrival of Quddus. We had erected the defences under his directions, and soon after came the first of many waves of attack.
Tell me about the first attack, in detail.
Very well. I am told that at this time, the Imperial Army did not think it much worth to send a proper regiment. Instead, it gave the task to one Abdullah Khan-i Turkaman, an officer resident in Mageyndren. He quickly gathered 12,000 men to march on us and set up barricades in front of the fort. We were unable to leave, even for water, much to the dismay of many of us there.
12,000 men. And you were 313 in number, with no water?
Yes. I am no student of war, Orhan. Neither do I understand strategy. What I do know is that God was with us. Quddus, he was looking over the walls of the fort to the enemy when he turned to Mullah Husayn and he said,
The scarcity of water has distressed our companions. God willing, this very night, a downpour of rain will overtake our opponents, followed by a heavy snowfall, which will assist us to repulse their contemplated assault.
That very night, the clouds thundered and the heavens sent a torrent of unexpected rain. Not only did we have an ample supply of water that would last, the rain destroyed much of the enemy's ammunition. The next night, if you can believe, came the snow, heavier than in winter. Check your records, my friend. I have no reason to lie. The next day, 2 hours after sunrise, we marched out to meet the enemy. I still remember the echoes of Ya Sahibul Zaman cried out by my lion-hearted companions as we charged the confused and unprepared troops. We had dispersed the entire army in under 1 hour. Their commander, Abdullah Khan, and more than 400 others had been slain. We returned to the fort, but took nothing from the slain save ammunition and horses.
And how many of your company perished?
None.
None.
One was injured badly, but none perished.
I can't.
Orhan, we were in that fort for 11 months. More than 7 major battles took place in which all of them we repelled larger and larger armies. The spirit was not of this earth. We were a company of men accompanied by a host of angels. To this I attribute our strength, our heart and our mind. But if it were not for them, Mullah Husayn and Quddus, our spirit would have broken long before the end.
How did they die?
I'd rather not talk about that. I can tell you about the end. The end of the whole...
There is no need. I have the full record of how Quddus surrendered to the prince after the prince had sworn on the Quran that the company would be safe. I'm aware this was a blatant lie and that many of whom were captured were tortured and killed. Now please, tell me how Mullah Husayn died.
I should have been there. To carry him back at the very least. Quddus had been shot in the battle at Vaskas earlier. He was not fit to ride out again. It was after midnight, I recall. I was not able to go, being injured in the last battle. He mounted his steed and he rode out into the night. I still remember his eyes before he charged out, almost smiling at me, as if saying, I have faith in you. That was the last time I saw him alive. He was shot in the breast after his horse became entangled in a tent rope. They carried him back to the fort, but he was unconscious by then. Quddus instructed that he be brought to his room, and there they sat in private. I was not able to see, but some of my companions told me that they saw Husayn sit upright upon being commanded by Quddus and conversed with him for 2 hours. They heard Mullah Husayn say,
May my life be a ransom for you. Are you well pleased with me?
Muhammad Baqir was the one to open the door when summoned by Quddus. Mullah Husayn had passed on, almost as if asleep, with a faint smile on his lips. It was the 2nd of February, 1849. Our beloved Husayn was 36 years of age. Quddus attended to his burial. He clothed him in his own shirt and gave instructions to lay him to rest at the south of the shrine of Sheikh Tabarsi. Only 7 were allowed to attend.
Well, is it with you to have remained to your last hour faithful to the covenant of God?
He said, as he laid a parting kiss upon his eyes and forehead.
I pray God to grant that no division ever be caused between you and me.
The tears of Quddus caused all those there to weep with him. Quddus with his own hands laid the body in the tomb and cautioned those who were standing near him to maintain secrecy regarding the spot which served as his resting place, and to conceal it even from the rest of us. He afterward instructed all of them to inter the bodies of the 36 martyrs who had fallen in the course of that engagement in one and the same grave, in the northern side of the shrine of Sheikh Tabarsi. He was heard to remark as he consigned them to their tomb,
Let the loved ones of God take heed of the examples of these martyrs of our faith. Let them in life be and remain as united as they are now in death.
I can only assume that the prince's men would have attacked immediately after knowing such a key figure had been killed.
They didn't find out for some time. In fact, after the last attack, they were so badly hit that it took 45 days before they could amass their troops to attack us.
With Mullah Husayn now gone, how did Quddus defend the fort? Your company would have been thoroughly demoralized.
I will not pretend it was not hard. We were at times reduced to eating grass and bones. At times it almost seemed too much to bear, and at times it was for some. There was abandonment, betrayal. But for the most part, we were all kept on the path by Quddus. He was that beacon of light at all times. Orhan, there are things that happened in that fort which defied all logic. But it only reinforced our belief in the truth.
The truth.
I still remember. Bullets and cannon fire was raining down on the fort, and there was fear among us. Quddus suddenly emerged from his room and walked to the center of the fort. As he did, a cannonball crashed through the fort and landed near his feet. Without flinching, he calmly rolled the cannonball with his foot and exclaimed,
How utterly unaware are these boastful aggressors of the power of God's avenging wrath? Have they forgotten that a creature as insignificant as a gnat was capable of extinguishing the life of the all-powerful Nimrod? Have they not heard that the roaring of the tempest was sufficient to destroy the people of Ad and Thamud and to annihilate their forces? Seek they to intimidate the heroes of God, in whose sight the pomp of royalty is but an empty shadow, with such contemptible evidence of their cruelty?
He then turned to us.
Do not be afraid of anything that comes from the enemy. You are the ones whom Muhammad spoke about in the Quran when he said, "Oh, how I long to behold the countenance of my brethren who will appear at the end of the world."
It was inspiration like this that allowed us, even when the fort was showered with bullet fire, to chant holy verses loudly together, drawing more and more strength from the Spirit of God. Muhammad Bakir, Mullah Husayn's nephew, often acted as Quddus' right hand after the passing of Mullah Husayn. On a number of occasions, under the instruction of Quddus, he rode out with as few as 18 accompanying men to challenge the enemy, often returning with little or no casualties. Such remarkable strength of the whole company is what prompted the so-called surrender to the prince. The prince knew that if not for this deceit, we would not give up.
Then why did Quddus give in to surrender? I mean, he would have known that there was no way the prince would have let them just leave.
It was time. We knew the actions of the prince were not genuine. We knew walking out would mean certain death. But that was besides the matter. Quddus was divinely guided in his instruction, which is why he bade Muhammad Bakir and a number of us to leave the encampment where the prince hosted us, and when it was obvious that the prince was being insincere.
I'm sorry about your friends and what happened to them. It was excessive.
Yes, it was. But you would not hear a complaint from any one of us. These things were preordained.
How? How can you say that? Where is the sense? I have records here that clearly show that when asked whether the company was rebelling against the Shah, the answer was a definite no. It was always about this faith, this new teaching. How then can it justify the way they butchered those who willingly surrendered? Torn apart with horses, cut into pieces, burned, shot out of the mouth of cannons. And worst of all, Quddus.
Quddus? You know how he was killed?
You do not?
No, I was only told that he was. The guards have refused to say any more to me. I shared much with you. Would you do me this honor?
Dastgir, it is not a story you may want to...
Orhan, give me this last respect before I leave this place.
No, I cannot. It is not my place. There is no need. Why do you need to know? I mean,
Orhan.
What is the benefit? Why? You can't bring him back. Why?
Orhan, because he was my master, my lord, my champion. Because he was my spirit in the darkest moments. And I know nothing about his death.
Quddus was taken by the prince to Barfurush immediately after the massacre in Mageyndren. The prince had not yet decided what to do with him at the time. He should have left hastily, but he stayed a long time too. The Saidul Ulama of Barfurush wanted Quddus dead and made no secret of his intention. Even though the prince desired to take Quddus back to the Shah in Tehran, the Ulama was bent on having him killed in that town. The prince soon realized that the Ulama had the support of the local people, and that he would soon be in danger if he did not hand over Quddus to the ulama. To try and alleviate the situation, the prince suggested that there be an inquiry of sorts and summoned Quddus. It did not go well. The ulama and the rest of the clerics present were put to shame by Quddus' knowledge. And so, fearing for his life, the prince washed his hands of all responsibility and left Quddus to the people of Barfurush. He was stripped of his clothes, his turban as well. They placed heavy chains around him to weigh him down, then dragged him through the streets with the mob attacking him, spitting on him, casting every kind of humiliation conceivable. The women attacked him with knives and axes. He suffered so much, too much. And through this all, do you know what he did? He asked repeatedly for forgiveness to the people. Forgive them, show mercy. You asked me why my face changed earlier? Why? Because his last words before that mob tore his body into pieces and cast it into the fire was this: would that my mother were with me and could see with her own eyes the splendor of my nuptials. After the incident, I inquired into the Bab and his whereabouts. I recorded this from his amanuensis, Sayyid Husayn-i-Aziz. What happened when the Bab heard of the happenings at Mageyndren and to Quddus. The Bab was heartbroken. He was crushed with grief, a grief that stilled his voice and silenced his pen. For 9 days he refused to meet any of his friends. I myself, though his close and constant attendant, was refused admittance. Whatever meat or drink we offered him, he was disinclined to touch. Tears rained continually from his eyes, and expressions of anguish dropped unceasingly from his lips. I could hear him, behind the curtain, give vent to his feelings of sadness as he communed, in the privacy of his cell with his beloved. I attempt to jot down the effusions of his sorrows as they poured forth from his wounded heart. Suspecting that I was attempting to preserve the lamentations he uttered, he bade me destroy whatever I had recorded. Nothing remains of the moans and cries with which that heavy-laden heart sought to relieve itself of the pangs that had seized it. For a period of 5 months he languished, immersed in an ocean of despondency and sorrow. Dastgir, what is it you found so attractive about this faith? Why would you sacrifice everything for it?
I had seen it in your heart as we spoke. The spark had been lit.
What? What are you talking about?
You can deny it to me, friend, but find the truth in yourself. You never came here to record my statement. You came here to search. You are seeking him in your heart.
Dastgir, you presume too much. I am not looking for anything. I just want to understand what madness drives men to such sacrifice.
Do not belittle that which you already know in your heart to be true. It is not my place to force you down this path. Yes, there is pain, there is suffering. But Where can a lover go if not to his beloved?
Then tell me, teach me.
I'm sorry. Our time is at an end. Find Mullah Sadiq in Shiraz. Search him out. He
Where
will
is
guide
he?
you to your heart's desire.
Which
What?
cell?
No, I need to understand now. You can't
Get in
just...
here. Take him out. Now.
What are you doing? Wait, I am not finished.
You had better be gone when I get back here, Turk, or you'll have a cell of your own.
Dastgir, I'm sorry, my friend, for what you have gone through, all of you. Dastgir! Dastgir! Dastgir!
Get him out. The Shah will have our head if he finds out what happened here.
Go with God, my friend, to Shiraz. We will likely not meet again. At least
Dastgir!
on this earth.
Dastgir! Dastgir! Dastgir, no!
Ya Sahibu Saman.